Yeah, and finally, it creates regime uncertainty. When your regime uncertainty is uncertainty that business individuals have about what laws and what regulations the government is going to enact in the future. By not being sure about what sorts of things the governments are going to enact in the future, it's more difficult to plan for the long term. Because you don't know what they're going to do, it's more difficult to judge the costs and benefits of these long-term actions. So you're going to have firms spending less money on things like innovations or investment in the capital that's going to increase their productivity in the future. That's going to make lower costs in the long run. So you actually have pressure keeping the prices high because it's still costly to produce. And that's the last of the stuff from chapter 1, or from whatever the first test, the first section. So next, a monopolistically competitive firm is producing an output level where marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost. What should this firm do to increase its profit or reduce its losses? So basically, at this point, the firm is making more money for the next unit they sell than the costs of producing it. So they can increase their profit by producing more goods. So if you're going to produce where your marginal revenue, equals the marginal cost. And at that point, that's where the firm's going to stop. That's what they're going to produce. In this case, the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost. So they can still keep producing and increasing their profit. So at this point, they're going to increase their production until their marginal revenue equals the marginal cost. And the same thing is if they're producing at a loss, they're still going to increase production to where marginal revenue equals marginal cost to minimize their losses. What happens to economic profit in the long run for a firm in monopolistic competition? Monopolistic competition in the long run is just like perfect competition. Because there's no barriers to entry, new firms are going to be able to enter and compete away profits if firms are earning an economic profit. Remember, an economic profit isn't the accounting profit; it's the accounting profit plus the opportunity cost. So so in the long run, as more firms are able to jump in and compete against them, what you're going to see is economic profit be competed down to zero. Remember, they still can be earning an accounting profit at this point, but the economic profit is going to be zero. They can't make any more money by selling different products or going into a different industry. However, that usually doesn't happen because firms innovate and are able to differentiate their products in this market. What they're going to do is, or what usually happens, is that they're able to innovate. They're then able to somehow distinguish their product from their competitors, earning them economic profits again. And this process continues on throughout the life cycle of this industry. So the next question is referring to the figure that's above it. It says, which of these graphs in the figure depicts a monopolistically competitive firm that is operating at a loss? The first curve, the first graph, it shows the average total cost curve is below the price at which the firm is selling. So in that case, because the price is greater than where average total cost crosses the quantity demanded, that's going to be a profit for the firm. So that firm is operating at an economic profit. In the second chart they show, panel B, the average total cost crosses the demand curve at the point at where the quantity demand is. So the difference between the price and the average total cost at that point is zero. They have a zero profit. This is the long run where competition has reduced price or reduced the profit to zero. Finally, panel C. This is the one where the firm is operating at a loss. In this case, the average total cost is greater than the price being sold at that quantity. So this is where the firm is operating at a loss. Now, next, although advertising raises the price of a monopolistic competitor's product, it does confer benefit to consumers. What are the potential benefits to consumers? The main benefit that consumers get from advertising is useful information. Whether it's the fact that they don't know about a good and they're being told about it for the first time, or they're being reminded where you can buy it, that it's easier to buy that product than buy like a similar product that's more difficult to buy, or whether they're being told the quality or the characteristics of a good. It's providing them with information that they can use to help determine whether they want to purchase or not. Some people see advertising as a waste of money or a way to deceive consumers. That's not necessarily the case. While not all advertisement seems to be beneficial, what it does is help provide consumers with information, because it's difficult to know the quality or the characteristics of a product before you purchase it and use it. So it's a way to reduce the lack of information, or help consumers get more information. Next is, according to public choice theory, what are the four groups that we analyze in collective decision making? Remember, this is the first group is politicians. Politicians, the people that campaign for, run for, and are elected to office. Next is the voters. These are the people that vote for the politicians in office. Next is the interest groups. Interest groups are groups of individuals that have a common shared interest. So imagine it could be a coal miners union. It could be a group of environmentalists. It could be a group of evangelical Christians. Whoever they are, they have some shared goals and some shared ideas. And the last group is bureaucrats, and these are employees that work for the government. They politicians enact laws, and they then put them into practice. They pass regulations. They actually design the regulations that are passed by Congress. Bureaucrats tend to, like anyone else working, they try to maximize their income, and they try to gain promotions. And we're not going to go too deep into public choice theory in the exam, just try to go over the basics. Next, why is it rational for voters to be uninformed or underinformed when it comes to elections? The reason why it's rational for voters to be uninformed is because knowledge is costly. It takes a lot of time to go through the issues, to not only know about them, but to break them down and understand them. And it's just not worth it, because individuals' votes very rarely matter and do not really affect the outcome of an election. So voters tend to be underinformed, like I showed you in the PowerPoint slide. It goes through the percentages of people that get these questions right, basic questions right about government. Only like 78% knew that Joe Biden was the VP back in 2010. And then it down was in like the 20% for like how many people can name the three branches of government. It's costly to get this knowledge, and even when you get that knowledge, it's not going to do that much. It's not going to have any sort of outcome. So it's not worth it for most people to get involved and to understand the issues. All right, so next, the sugar quota is a policy that's very costly for American consumers. Despite its cost, how does this policy remain in place? And this is the idea of dispersed costs and concentrated benefits. That interest groups, in this case, sugar producers, they lobby the legislature, so in this case, Congress, the politicians, to enact a quota on sugar to help basically limit the supply of sugar coming from overseas. So it allows them to sell their sugar at a higher price. There's not too many sugar producers in the United States, so they earn a pretty nice profit from that. They really benefit from it. Meanwhile, even though people tend to pay a lot, it's I don't remember the exact number from the slides. It was like $100 to $200, like per person, from the increased price of all the products that use sugar. These costs are dispersed. Like, very few people know about them because it's not that much money. And then it's so difficult to organize everyone together, because if you think about it, a truly rational person will be willing to spend, if their if the sugar quota is costing them $100 a year, they'll be willing to spend $99.99 to get rid of that. But it's so difficult to try to get a group of people together. It takes a lot of time and money. These are serious costs, so it's just not worth it for people to get together to try to lobby government to overthrow, or to not overthrow, but to get rid of that policy that costs them. Mansur Olson, in Logic of Collective Action, he talked about dispersed costs and concentrated benefits, and how small groups, because they have a a lot to gain from these policies are able to enact these policies and get politicians to enact these policies that put a small per person cost, but a large overall cost on American taxpayers or just regular people. Another question, why do politicians tend to be overly focused on the short term, and what are some examples? This question didn't end up making it onto your exam, but politicians tend to be overly focused on the short term because elections are short term and they need results that they can demonstrate to their constituents, their potential voters. So you tend to have politicians supporting big ribbon cutting ceremonies, like putting in a new bridge, new infrastructure, rather than making repairs to old infrastructure, because it's hard to get a really good photo op, repairing, you're doing regular repairs on a bridge. But ribbon cutting ceremony, everyone loves those. All right. The next is, what are the three main roles of money? So the first role of money is a medium of exchange. That's why money exists, so that we're able to use it to get goods and services from other people. Remember, in a barter economy, it's very difficult. You have to find someone who not only wants what you have, but you have to want what they have. It's called the dual coincidence of wants. It makes trying to exchange very difficult. So people end up trading for other goods that a lot of people want, to make it easier to exchange goods. Eventually, through time, it settles on one good. This is usually commodity money, some sort of gold or silver, like precious metal. And then eventually now we have fiat currency. It's not backed by anything. But we end up with one medium of exchange that we're able to use to trade back and forth to get goods and services. It's also a unit of account. So the prices of all the goods are literally listed. So in the United States, it's dollars. It's very easy to compare the value of very different goods because of that. So you literally can't compare apples and oranges because they're both denominated in dollars. Finally, is a store of value that you can keep cash for long periods of time. You can save it for years, and it'll keep its value. You can still trade it for stuff. If you're trying to trade, goods in like a barter economy, eventually your barley is going to rot and go bad. Eventually, the oxen is going to die. So it's a way to store value and keep it for the future, so you're able to save. Next, why does money tend to converge to one currency? What characteristics of precious metals made them so widely used as standard currency? So money tends to converge to one currency because it's easier that way. To have all the goods listed in one price is cheaper and easier. You don't have to worry about what is today's conversion ratio. You just have it listed in US dollars, and that's how it stays. It does that because it's the easiest, and it converges to the best, most useful currency. And what characteristics of precious metals made them so widely used as standard currency? That's not going to be on the exam, so you guys don't have to worry about that. Next is, why does Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have such volatile values? The reason their cryptocurrencies values are volatile is the fact that they are on a set money supply path. So when more people want to use one of these cryptocurrencies, they exchange more dollars to get those, the value increases. When people are selling them, they don't want them, they want to go back to US dollars, the value decreases. That's basically that's all you would have to know for that. Next, gypsies have a very interesting strict laws and superstitions. Despite their weirdness, why is it an example of individuals acting rationally to solve a societal problem? So the gypsies were trying to solve problems they faced because they could not go to government in the countries they lived in to solve their disputes. They couldn't form their own governments because they were so spread out, and they couldn't rely on non-government actions, things like ostracism, because they weren't around each other a lot. They were in small groups, constantly traveling. So it was hard to keep track of all these things. So what they did was create these superstitions about ritual purity and uncleanliness. And they tied these spiritual things to other crimes, more antisocial crimes, things like like violent stuff, so like murder, like fighting, but then also things like breaching contracts and cheating each other. While they seem odd, it's a way to tie. And well, let's go back. They were very strict about it, and if an individual was unclean, they could pass on that uncleanliness to other people. And you were cast out of the gypsy world. So what this does is it forced individuals to go through and learn the histories of these other gypsies, like the new strangers that came into the camp. If they didn't know an individual, they had a very strong incentive to find out about them. And then, if they found out that they were unclean, they could ostracize them. They could refuse to allow them to come around with them because it would make them unclean. Now, these laws were very costly, and they did that to weed out, what's called lukewarm believers, people that aren't truly committed to believing the gypsy code, and that's to prevent people, like if people didn't like really believe in the gypsy superstitions, believe about the ritual cleanliness, and that it could be passed on between people, and it would ruin their lives, hurt their souls. Then they would allow people that committed these crimes, they transgressed against the community, they'd allow them to live with them, and they wouldn't ostracize them, and this would prevent them from effectively screening out this antisocial behavior. Next, how did ordeals separate the guilty from the innocent? So what ordeals did was, it was built on the belief in Iudicia Dei, which is literally an act of God that would, if you were innocent of a crime and you would undergo an ordeal, that God would prevent you from being injured because you were innocent. But if you were guilty, you would get injured. He would allow you to get injured. Now, when people believed in Iudicia Dei, if you were guilty and you had to undergo an ordeal, you believed that you were going to get hurt by that ordeal, that you would get your arm, all burned up or, boiled, whatever, in the water. And then, because you failed the ordeal, you would also, go to jail. You would suffer the punishments. However, if you were innocent, you believed if you stuck your hand in that boiling water, you would not get hurt. And then you would not be punished. So what it did was it separated guilty people. Obviously, it's going to be more costly. If you confess, you get punished. If you don't confess, you undergo the ordeal, you get burned, and you get punished. It's going to be way better to just admit that you were guilty. On the other hand, if you're innocent, you don't think you are going to get hurt by the ordeal, so you're willing to undergo. And then, like we talked about in class, I showed a bunch of examples and statistics about how individuals that underwent ordeals, a vast majority of the time, were declared not guilty. So unless the priest didn't understand how fire worked and didn't know how to boil water, they were acting to not burn these people. They were purposely changing the ordeals to make them not hurt these people, because they knew if they were undergoing the ordeal, they'd be innocent. And another note that we talked about was the type of ordeals. There was hot water and cold water ordeals. Women would not be sent to the cold water ordeals because they tend to have a higher body fat percentage than men. They would fail the ordeals much more often. So women were always sent to hot water ordeals. Men were sent to either or. And we showed a couple examples of men and women accused of the same crime. Men were sent to cold water ordeals, where they all passed. Women were sent to warm water or hot ordeals, where they all passed. I skipped one. When beliefs and superstitions that legal practices like gypsy law and ordeals are based on wane, what happens to those legal systems? Well, ordeals were banned by the Fourth Lateran Council in 1214 or 1215 AD. Within 5 years, pretty much every European state banned ordeals, because there was no longer a religious backing to them. People no longer believed in Iudicia Dei, so if someone was guilty, if someone was innocent, they would no longer submit to the ordeal because they thought they were going to get burned. Likewise, gypsy law is held together by the superstitions and the ritual cleanliness or impurity. as these superstitions have been waning over the past 50 to 60 years, we've seen much less reliance on gypsy law. And we've seen them trying to go to their like local or state governments, wherever they happen to be living, to try to get their disputes settled. Yeah, when they no longer have these superstitious beliefs underlying these odd superstitious legal practices, we see the legal systems disappear, because that was what really was holding them together. All right, the longbow, that's not going to be on the exam. Finally, explain how markets arose in POW camps, what economic phenomena occurred. So in the POW camps, that's when the Red Cross, this is something I went through real quickly, the Red Cross dropped off things for the POWs. They dropped off some like small rations, a little bit of food, some cigarettes, things like that, to try to keep them alive and somewhat happy. Now, over time, what happened was, obviously, some people don't like to smoke, some people don't like chocolate. The Hindus that were in the camp, they weren't able to eat beef, so any kind of like beef stuff they would want to get rid of. So they began to trade with each other, and over time, originally it's just one person here, one person there, trying to trade goods. So it could be all different prices. Over time, as the markets expanded to like the entire, imagine the market as being like the entire POW camp of a couple thousand people. What happened was they all the prices settled to literally one price. So you would trade, I don't know, 6 cans of carrots for one ration of beef. And then eventually they began, instead of using direct barter for like the 20 different goods they had, they began to trade cigarettes as the currency, because just about everyone wanted cigarettes, and everyone got cigarettes. That became the currency they would use. We saw entrepreneurs open up businesses. We saw people acting as middlemen, where they would buy from someone to sell to somebody else, because maybe they were the only person in their camp, in their area of the camp, that could speak to the Hindus. So they would go over, buy the beef from the Hindus, trade them whatever, and then sell that to the other, British people that don't know how to speak the Hindus' language. Let's see. Okay, so what also happened was they oh, now I'm blanking on this. Oh, because the goods were not purchased, there was no labor that went into them within these camps. The labor theory value really falls apart, and the guy who wrote this article, who was in the POW camp for several years, he talked about how Marx's labor theory value falls apart. That these goods still had value because of the relative demand for them, that some people really wanted them, some people didn't want them. They're willing to trade back and forth. That's how the value was created, from what it was the subjective value that the individuals thought that each of these goods held, rather than the labor theory value. So you don't have the prices of goods being inflated for obscene profits that the bourgeoisie class is exploiting the workers. You don't have that in this situation. You just have this subjective value coming out. And I believe that is it for my study guide. Let me check this exam again to make sure I didn't add any questions that wasn't on there. Yeah, so that covers just about everything. Exam is Thursday morning at 8 a.m. in our regular classroom. If you have any questions, well, I guess really tomorrow is your only chance, but if you have any questions tomorrow, May 1st, feel free to come by my office and talk to me. I'll be there just about all day, because this is my only class, so when I'm not doing stuff for the class, I'm just doing the research for the center. So I'll be here if you need me. If not, good luck on the exam.